It was September 2023. I set off on my first solo travelling journey of my life, on a search to explore how queer people from around Europe see peace and justice, and the importance in the ability to present authentic to oneself interacts with this. Travelling from London, I first arrived in Amsterdam. That's my bed. My first day, I went out to explore Amsterdam. My first couple days in Amsterdam, I hopped from one art gallery to the next. I found myself to be quite self-conscious as I wandered around the city, not sure where to place myself in the busy streets. A sentiment I recalled in a couple voice messages I sent a friend.
This is sort of my first time out alone in a weird way. I mean, I've been alone walking around the streets and stuff, but Amsterdam's packed. I feel like I haven't been alone for a very long time, even though there's a couple women just about 100 metres away. I think an interesting thing about going abroad or just travelling is finding what role you play to other people without you dictating your life in a way. In the hostel, I'm known as sort of like the young one, I think. I'm 18 and they are all like 24 or more. It's interesting, like, that's just the role I play. I think quite a lot of queerness is about stepping outside of the roles that society gives you and finding your own roles, your own story to tell. And I think partly I'm struggling with that a little bit. You know, I have a safety bubble of home where everyone knows me. I don't have to explain myself.
That next morning, I set off again on a 6-hour journey to Berlin.
I'm in Berlin. I have arrived. I'm pretty sure I have at least in Berlin something. I've got 2 more stops to go. And I am exhausted.
First day, I began with a walking tour, which took me from the Brandenburg Gate to the Berlin Wall. Throughout this tour, I was struck with Berlin's approach to its history, with emphasis on an open conversation about its past, bullet wounds and buildings being filled in but not covered up. Here is my tour guide addressing the memorial dedicated to those persecuted for being homosexual in the Nazi regime.
They were sent to work camps and concentration camps, and they were given a pink triangle to identify them. By the end of the war, 3,000 approximately homosexuals were assassinated. The memorial is right over there. You see that box, that complete stone? That's the memorial for the assassinated homosexuals in Germany. Inside there's a small picture that shows and tells the story of this group.
Meeting with another travel grant recipient the next day, she reciprocated my feelings towards Berlin, discussing Britain's problems with not being receptive to criticism of its past, specifically in addressing the remnants of the British Empire.
Later that day, I met with a filmmaker who had lived in Berlin for about a year. I did not record an interview with her, but she told me of Berlin's atmosphere and openness. What struck me most of our conversation was her descriptions of Berlin as community and its relation to fashion. She told me compared to her time in London, Berliners were far more experimental and free with their style, expressing themselves in extravagant ways without an element of performatism to it.
Wonder Bowie came here, and the Beatles, and everyone. It's nice.
Through my time in Berlin, I saw 4 protests for various causes. This also felt in keeping with the approach Berlin seemed to have. Welcoming conversation and protest meant I often felt safer and freer to be authentic, as activism against hate was openly supported. After a very beautiful yet busy train journey, I arrived in Prague. My first day, I interviewed a gender-neutral barberette about her Prague shop.
I'm Clara, and I cut hair for a living. I have a gender-neutral barbershop. She's called Barberette, so it's like a woman barber, basically, Barberette. And then I have one shop in London, and then I moved back home to Prague and opened another shop in Prague. Back then, not even in London exists any queer open space for haircuts, and the hair industry was, and is getting better, was very gendered. So the women goes to hairdressers, the men goes to barbers. I know that in 90s and 80s there were a lot of queer people were living in squats in Brixton, for example. I saw the document, and I'm sure they were cutting each other's hair, because the document I saw some wicked hair cuts there. So I'm sure that people were doing it for the community always. I'd never felt in place in either of the hairdressers or barbers. There were some alternative ones like punk hairdressers, and they were very friendly, but it wasn't me. I wanted to kind of open, and then I wanted to open a shop where everyone feels welcome. Yeah, I think it's the first thing you see in the morning to yourself if you look in the mirror. It's your face and your hair. And if the hair doesn't replicate who you are, it will give you, the feelings, kind of, you will feel down, you will feel not yourself. And having a haircut you really want is one of the most important things in life, I think, for people's well-being. Clients say to me that you make them feel like themselves.
After the conversation with Clara, I began to note people's haircuts more, how comfortable they looked within themselves. And with this in mind, the importance of authenticity in expression became more and more linked to peace in oneself in my mind.
Room tour. Okay, that's the stairs up. This is the beds. Me on the beds. And then there's my bed. And then we have a lovely view. Well, there's the stairs. Oh, wait, can you go? Oh my god. This changes things.
That's so sick. That's so sick. That's my bedroom window.
When I was in Vienna, I spoke to some fellow travellers at the hostel I was staying at. I wasn't able to record them, unfortunately, but they shared with me their experiences travelling. We agreed that often the openness of a place can affect how comfortable you feel as a queer person travelling. The next day, we attended a walking tour, which enriched the streets of Vienna with its history, painting the legacy of musicians and artists in every street. However, we felt, though acknowledged may have just been the opinions of our tour guide, that Vienna was not as receptive to criticism as our experiences in Germany. This changed our experience somewhat, as Vienna became less adaptive to change and progress in our eyes. With now somehow much heavier bags, I walked to the metro station as the streets filled with syrupy orange light. I got the metro, then a train headed to Nuremberg. I knew very little of the city before arriving, but decided to grab an ice cream and take an evening stroll through the town.
That's what we call it. That's what I call it. I love that one. That one. I haven't tried that one. I was in this church and I was talking to these two men, and then I went in a little bit further and I talked to some man and he was like, the acoustics in here are amazing. And I was like, yeah, they're really good. And he was like, do you sing? And I was like, no. And he was like, oh, it's a shame, I'm looking for people to sing with me. And he sang 3 notes and they were so beautiful. And then I said, if I find anyone out on the street, I'll say, do you sing? And I'll send them in here.
Unbeknownst to me, I was walking into my 5th protest in Germany. Here's a couple clips from the protest and a voice message I sent to a friend.
Seit dem Alltag auf der Straße oder ein Betrieb.
I've walked into like 5 different protests, you can hear one in the background, and they chant Internationale Solidarität.
Bonjour. Welcome to Paris. You listening?
My second day in Paris, I went to the Pompidou Centre, where I attended the Over the Rainbow Gallery. This is a collection of art exploring the fight for recognition and rights for the LGBT community. I found this gallery thought-provoking in relation to the topics I was exploring through interrailing. As I read the stories of various artists, I began to see correlations of where artists gravitated to in different decades, with 1910s Paris being quoted by Natalie Clifford as the only city where you can live and express yourself as you please, to late 1920s Berlin being quoted as a haven for homosexuals. It was fascinating to see these legacies within each city and recognise artists and activists that fought for the rights to express as you please. spent my final days of the trip pondering the different walks of life I had experienced on my journey, but before I knew it, I was heading home.
I'm really gonna miss waking up in places that aren't home, but feel like it. Good night, Paris. Bye, Paris.
By the whole trip. You've been great.
Now writing this, I'm back in my pocket of the world, happily tired. I can reflect on my Interrail journey, from hostel to hostel meeting amazing people. I feel I learnt a lot in those 3 weeks, but what stuck with me most was the history of each city, the reoccurring resilience of people which paved the way for others to express themselves freely, to set up hair-cutting shops and dress in their own ways. I feel now more than ever that it is our history that links us, and the acknowledgement of what has come before, whether that be in the case of the persecution of homosexuals or the fight for rights. Without this knowledge, we cannot progress, and with every person expressing themselves freely and every protest, the future feels brighter. This is peace to me, free expression and the hope for improvement.